Every year I have a reading project that just kind of keeps me motivated as the year goes on. I need like just enough structure to keep going, but not enough structure that I burn myself out. So I'm always walking like this tightrope of trying to stay motivated to read and explore new things and try new stuff without getting just completely in the weeds and not caring anymore. So this last year, I made a project at the beginning of the year for my nonfiction, and I failed it after about 4 months, but I had a lot of fun while I was doing it, and then I just got too focused on my other project. And that other project was reading at least one thing written by every author on the Dungeon Master's Guide's Appendix N. So after doing that, I felt really good. It was like 36 books or something that I had to read to get to that point, and all of them were worth reading, either because now I realized I don't want to read that kind of stuff anymore, or because they're now some of my favorite books of all time. And I bring this up because I've got a new project for 2024. My project for this year is Glenn Cook. And Glenn Cook has always been one of my favorite writers. I mean, I have a Black Company tattoo on my forearm. So, of course, I love Glenn Cook and I love the Black Company. But this year's exploration is about everything that's not the Black Company. Glenn Cook is known for writing the Black Company, but he has over 50 novels. And, 10 of those, well, 11, are Black Company novels. So what are the other 39? Well, the other 39 are a mix of noir detective stories written in a fantasy setting, which is Garrett P.I. I've read the first 9 of those. They're great. Then we've got another 10-book epic fantasy series, The Dread Empire, and I've read the first one, and holy crap, that is not what I was expecting when I started it, and I've just heard it gets weirder and better as it goes on, and I am so excited. And I'll talk about that too in this. But then we have standalones that are fantasy, some short story collections, and then the secret sauce. Glenn Cook wrote science fiction. He wrote space operas. I had no idea until I really started digging into his stuff, and I listened to a couple of the short stories in the audiobook collection of The Best of Glenn Cook, and holy crap, his science fiction is awesome, and there's so much range to it. He's got space operas. He's got science fantasy stuff that is like Jack Vance's Dying Earth before the Earth started dying. So you've got this weird mix of science and magic and all these duplicitous like dudes who are basically playing God. It's super cool. And that story's right here. Winter's Dreams. It's a very cool short story. This is a Subterranean Press book, and I've talked about it before, but it's a collection of short stories, and I've read about half of them now, and man, they're real good. But yeah, as I'm rambling about this, my project is to read everything Glenn Cook has ever written. And to do that, I had to create a personal bibliography. And so I'm going to share that in the description. It's just a Google Doc that's a list. I don't know how to make spreadsheets, and I don't want to learn how, so I just made a Word doc and made a list. So anyways, let's dig into this. I'm going to start with the standalones and the science fiction because it's really freaking cool. So we've got the Sword Bearer. So one of my goals as I expand this collection is to upgrade my current copies. Like there's a cooler version of the Sword Bearer. I'm going to get that. Some of them you just can't get outside of mass market paperback. Like the last 3 books in the Garrett P.I. collection, they were only ever printed as mass market paperbacks. It's a bummer. Yeah, the Sword Bearer, I started it once and it was kind of slow and I really wasn't feeling it, but I can't wait to get to it. It's just like it's kind of a hero's journey, just fantasy book. And then we got the Tower of Fear, which there is a much cooler version of this. I'm just going to get the first edition hardcover that was published by Tor. This is just a fantasy book with an interesting premise. It's standalone. It's under 400 pages like most of his books, so it'll be great to read. Now let's get into these other standalones, man. They're super cool. A Matter of Time. This involves time travel and seems kind of trippy. I'm really looking forward to it. And let's shout out Nightshade Books because they have reprinted almost all of his stuff, and it's just great to be able to get high quality printings. I started this book in audio and I did not like the narrator at all. We've got The Heirs of Babylon, and this is a post-apocalyptic novel. It takes place in 2193 and World War II is still going on. There's been biological weapons used that have wiped out massive amounts of the population, and you just see basically these different nations fighting over the scraps that are left. And you get to see that from the eyes of just a regular soldier. And I really can't wait to get into it further. What little I listened to while the narrator was not good was very, very interesting. So it's very high up on my list. And the cool thing is this was his first published novel under his name. And he writes a little tidbit at the beginning. It's great to just hear anything from Glenn Cook when he's talking about his works of fiction. So I'm super hyped about that. And this last standalone that I want to share, Glenn Cook himself has said this is his greatest work, which is just mind-blowing to think that the guy that wrote The Black Company is like, hey, this space opera that I wrote? Yeah, this is my best work. work, not the series that everyone loves. It's just awesome. I can't wait to get to it. It's like 450 pages and it's a standalone, so I really can't wait to get to this. All right, so we're starting to creep into the science fiction, so let's just get it out of the way right now. We have the Starfishers trilogy. And the Starfishers trilogy, I have heard that like the first book is different than the other two, and there's like spy thriller elements, there's just all sorts of weird stuff. And you know what? I'm open to it. The Starfishers and The Dragon Never Sleeps and a lot of his science fiction, he wrote in what he calls his historical future Earth. And so it's basically his interpretation of what the future is going to look like branching off of our current Earth timeline. So all this hard sci-fi, I guess, is built in the same universe, which is just even better. Like none of them even directly interact with each other. It's kind of like Dune in the fact that the people on Arrakis, they don't know where Earth is. This is so far into the future and technology has changed so much that we've lost contact with Mother Earth. And that's kind of what it alludes to in a lot of these. There are people from Earth, but Earth is just a turd. Like no one wants to be there. It's just basically a giant slum. And so people branch out and move off, and civilization has moved on from Earth. And I think that's a really cool premise. All right, well, we have Dark War, which is science fantasy, and that's awesome. When I saw Dark War the first time, it was in this like collection of paperbacks, like little mass market paperbacks. And I'm like, is this fantasy? Is this science fiction? Is that a spaceship? I really couldn't tell. And so it's nice to know it's science fantasy. So if there's anyone I would trust to write some amazing science fantasy, this is going to be Glenn Cook. And yeah, this isn't everything. This is just the stuff I have right now. I plan on getting more as well. I want the Instrumentalities of the Night series, which is one of his later fantasy series he wrote. It's a dark fantasy series he wrote in the early 2000s. And that one seems interesting. I know very little about it. And so I'm going to go into it almost blind. I did that with the Dread Empire and I was just blown away. I was like, what even is this? And so let's start with that. Like the Dread Empire has been something else. I'm one book into it. This is A Cruel Wind, which is an omnibus collection of the first 3 books in the Dread Empire series. And I've heard the first book is way different than the others. I kind of think of it as like a TV pilot where the pilot's trying to get all this stuff in at once, and you know, some characters might change, the shift of the show might alter its focus, but it's just good enough to keep me going. And I was very entertained as I read it. I gave it like a 4 stars or something because I know that Glenn Cook can do better, but everything that was there was very enjoyable and very trippy. I'm gonna make a review of it when I review this entire book. And yeah, the Dread Empire just started out really weird, but in like the best way possible. I don't know how else to put it. It's got a foreword by Jeff Vandermeer talking about the influence of Glenn Cook on all of fantasy. The first book in the series, A Shadow of All Night Falling, it does not read like it was written in 1979. It's incredible. You go through it and you're just like, whoa, wow, there's a lot going on here. There's a bunch of layers and stuff. And the biggest thing that sold me on the Dread Empire series is Glenn Cook said that he built the world of the Dread Empire to tell stories in. So he didn't start with the story. He started with the world, and then he put the people into that world, and the way they're affected by the setting itself is how he wrote his stories. It's so cool. Like the setting itself is a character that you see all through these books. And like the Dread Empire is this empire way in the east, and the second set of books that's in this collection, A Fortress in Shadow, they don't even involve the Dread Empire, but it doesn't matter. It's just the world itself. And that's what he was doing, was just creating this world that he could put all this stuff in, which kind of sounds like Malazan. And as I bring up Malazan, when you read the first book in the Dread Empire series, you're like, there's a lot of Malazan in this. I don't mean like Erickson stole the idea or anything. It's like Glenn Cook's not the first person to write a fantasy series that involves a big empire and a huge world and all that. This is obviously something that heavily influenced Erickson, and I look at it the same way I look at Jack Vance's The Dying Earth and Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun. Both are Dying Earth books, but I think in this situation, Glenn Cook walked so Steven Erikson could run. Like, Steven Erikson is such a fantastic writer, and he took a world and just built these people in this story into it in the same way Glenn Cook is doing with the Dread Empire. And I think it's so cool. And so to be able to read this after reading Malazan and after reading The Black Company, it's just great. The interesting thing about it is this is nothing like The Black Company. This is written in third person, not first person. You follow a bunch of different people. I mean, it's epic fantasy. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of characters and stuff like that. There's like weird stuff, like real weird stuff. I just started October's Baby, which is also an insane name for a book. And look at this cover. Like, this is amazing. Like, it's so absurd. If someone handed me this book and I couldn't see the author's name and they were like, would you read this? I'd be like, bro, it has a wizard, a knight, and a messianic flying baby. Of course I'm going to read this. Are you kidding me? And I think I found out who the baby is, and I'm not okay right now. Like, this is getting weird in like the best ways possible. But anyways, the Dread Empire is freaking cool. And we've got a collection of short stories, and this bad boy is signed. This is leather bound and signed. There were only 250 of these made. I got it for a steal because it's got a little boo-boo in this corner that you can't even see. Let's take the flap off. See that? All that crinkling of the Mylar, but there's like a little crease in the corner. It was cheaper than one that wasn't signed. It's a win for me. And then I had to overpay for this. This has only been printed once. It's the final collection in the Dread Empire, and it includes a book I accidentally bought separately, but that's okay. I'll probably keep it because it's beautiful. A Path to Coldness of Heart. This is the last book in the series, and this book was written way, way later, and I hope that it's not flawed because of that, but it's completely understandable why it was written so much later. Someone stole the manuscript from his house, so Glenn Cook was just like, well, not finishing it now. And I think Nightshade Books, when they picked up the series, they were like, what's up with that last book? At least I'm hoping that's how it happened. You know, who knows? Anyways, it's done, so it's a complete series. It's a big series. I say it's a big series. The books have got some girth to them, but this is 3 books. This is 2 books. This is 3 books. This is a collection of short stories. And if you put them all together, they're like the length of 3 Malazan books. So, you know, I say it's a big series, but the books are short. They're like 300 pages at most. And so it's great. And I completed that collection and I'm so happy. They're freaking beautiful. And let's move on to like the last couple things. We got Sung in Blood. This bad boy signed. I already talked about it, but yeah, this is just a novella. It's gonna be great to read. I can't wait to get to it. And stuff I don't have here are the rest of the Garrett P.I. novels. A Passage of Arms, which is something I really want to read. It's one of his space opera stories. And there's just a handful of other things I need. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this project this year. I love Glenn Cook's writing. He has a way of, I noticed it in the Dread Empire especially, he has a way of creating just prose and just little sentences that are just so simple and so neat. I don't know how this man manages to make 2 sentences hit me as hard as 2 pages from other writers. I love it. And his characters are always great. I finished the first Dread Empire book and I'm like, who's the good guy? Like there wasn't a good guy. Like there's just people. There's just people in this world and they're doing the best they can. They have their own motivations. They're after certain things. Sometimes it's revenge. Sometimes it's trying to rescue someone they love. I seriously finished it and I'm like, I think I was rooting for the bad guy this whole time. But yeah, you know, that's what Glenn Cook's so good at. I hope some of you will join me on this Glenn Cook journey. I'm really excited to start it. 2024 is going to be an amazing year for reading. I think my brain is going to melt. But yeah, leave a comment if any of you are going to go on his journey with me, even just a 1-book journey, just 1 book. Read The Dragon Never Sleeps with Me. He said it's his best book and the one he likes the most. And that's really saying something from him, considering when you ask him what the hardest book he's ever written is, he's like, the one I'm working on right now. He always gives answers like that and I love it. So for him to have come out and actually said which one was his favorite or he thought was his best work, that's saying something. Give me a like and a subscribe if you too are a Glenn Cook enjoyer. And with that, I'll see you next time.